arguably the end of an era over at Tesla, or the beginning of the robot uprising, depending on how you look at it. That's right, Elon Musk has confirmed that they are officially killing off the Model S and Model X. Why? Well, apparently they need more factory space in Fremont to build the Optimus robot. Because who needs to drive to the store when you can just send your robot pal? I think that's how it works. The plan is to churn out a staggering 1 million robots a year once production kicks off in 2026. Now, whether you think that swapping established cars for robotics is a stroke of genius or a massive gamble, probably depends on how much you trust Elon's timelines, and we all know how those usually go. But if you actually look at the numbers, and I promise you to keep the math short, the logic does kind of start to add up. 2025 wasn't exactly a stellar year for Tesla. We saw the first ever annual drop in revenue, and profits tumbled by 46%. Sales of the S and X had essentially evaporated combined. They sold less than about 19,000 units last year. For context, they usually sell twice that many Model 3Ss in a single quarter. So cutting the dead weight to focus on the next big thing does make financial sense, assuming the next big thing actually works. However, if you're still keen on getting a Model S or X, there's still time, as Elon is quoted as saying, if you're interested in buying the Model S or the X, now would be the time to order it. Nothing says smart investment like buying a car that the manufacturer just publicly announced that they're done with. But here's where it gets optimistic. Sorry, I had to. The company is pivoting hard to a future based on autonomy, yet we still have these lingering questions from the Weird Robot event last October from Tesla, where reports suggest that the impressive robots were actually being teleoperated by humans. I mean, if the robots still need a human puppeteer, hitting that 1 million unit target might be a bit of a stretch. But hey, if anyone can sell a future that isn't quite here yet, it's Tesla. And because one story about the robot uprising isn't enough to keep you up at night, let's look at what's happening over in China. The PLA has demonstrated a massive leap in drone warfare, showcasing a system where one soldier can control a swarm of 200 drones simultaneously. And here I was feeling accomplished with managing my 3 group chats at once. The footage released by the state broadcaster CCTV, and nope, it does not stand for closed circuit TV for anyone confused like I was, it stands for Chinese Central Television. Anyway, this shows that the fixed wing drones are launching for the vehicle like a disturbing beehive, 48 at a time, and forming up in the sky. But the real story isn't just the number, it's the AI behind it. They're using what they call bio-inspired AI, modeled after hawks and wolf packs. Essentially, the drone stops acting like a machine and starts acting like predators, autonomously negotiating tasks amongst themselves. That said, the most impressive, or concerning depending on whereabouts you live, feature is that the anti-jamming capability. The official line is that you could cut the communication link to the operator. The swarm doesn't just fall out the sky or, return home to base. Instead, the AI takes over, heals the network, and continues the mission on its own. Now, while China is scaling up the swarms, the rest of the world is frantically trying to figure out how we actually swap them. The US and the UK are currently testing high-powered microwaves and lasers, like the Dragonfire system, which costs around $13 a shot. I mean, that's a real bargain. It's basically a high-stake game of rock, paper, scissors, except it's swarm laser microwave. What I do know is that we are rapidly moving past the point of piloting drones and straight into an era of just commanding them. And if the simulations are accurate, where these Hawk drones wipe out a defending squad in about 5 seconds, we might need to start investing in some really, really big magnets. In a story that feels like it happened entirely in fast forward, we have the rise and fall of the rebrand of Moltbot. So no, it's OpenClaw now. In just 72 hours, the open source AI agent went from being the internet's new favorite toy, ranking a record-breaking 17,000 GitHub stars in a single day, which has increased to over 150,000, and now many people are actually finding out that it's actually, a security nightmare. The pitch was really good. I mean, it's an AI assistant that lives on your computer, so local, and actually does things for you, like checking your emails, booking appointments via WhatsApp, rather than just, chatting like a normal LLM. But because we can't have nice things, it turns out that prioritizing frictionless deployment over, basic security has consequences. First, there was a trademark dispute with Anthropic because apparently naming your AI Claude sounded a little too much like Claude. I mean, it's written different, but it sounds exactly the same. I mean, who could have seen that coming? It was then rebranded to Moltbot before being rebranded again to OpenClaw. I'm sure it'll be called something completely different by the time you're watching this. But the name changes are the least of the worries, actually. Security researchers found that this thing is essentially insecure by default. We're talking about 200 leaked secrets, including API keys and corporate credentials, just floating around in the public repositories because users didn't realize that their workspaces were being exposed. And if that wasn't enough, someone managed to upload a malicious extension to the Microsoft Store, well, the Visual Studio Marketplace, before the rebrand was even finished. They gave hackers remote access to your machine. So, while OpenClaw promises to be the assistant that never sleeps, it might just be because it's too busy leaking all your data on the internet. If you were one of the thousands who forked this repo, you might want to check your bank statement. And just when Snap thought they were out the woods, they get pulled back in, only days after settling a massive social media addiction lawsuit on the 20th of January, probably hoping for a quiet week. They were hit on the 23rd of Jan with a class action lawsuit from the group of YouTubers led by H3H3 Productions. The lawsuit alleges that Snap didn't just accidentally, ingest the YouTube videos while walking past the server room. Ooh, what's this? No, they accused Snap of actively circumventing YouTube security measures. We're talking about using virtual machines that rotate IP addresses, to dodging YouTube's anti-scraping bots. Basically, if YouTube locked the front door, Snap allegedly dressed up as a pizza guy, then a plumber, and then, Jehovah's Witness, just to sneak in and grab that juicy data. Specifically, they're accused of scraping the HD Villa 100 million dataset, or 100M. Now, aside from having the name of, that just rolls off the tongue, the dataset contains about 100 million video clips and explicitly licensed for academic and research uses only. So using it to train a commercial product like Snap's image lens, it's a bit of like using a student discount to buy a fleet of corporate jets. It just doesn't fly. The plaintiffs, which include Ethan Klein's H3H3 and somewhat randomly a couple of golf channels, because apparently AI needs to improve its swing. Now, what makes this interesting is the focus on the method. Tech companies love to scream fair use when they train their AI, but the fair use defense against, assumes you obtained the material legally. It's much harder to claim you're a fair user when you allegedly had to break a digital lock and wear a disguise just to, get the information. This is the latest in a series of lawsuits from the same group against Meta, Nvidia, and ByteDance. So, they're clearly on a mission to set a precedent here. For Snap, it means their legal team is going to be billing a lot of overtime this month. What a great time to be a lawyer. And after what feels like an eternity of here's what Siri could do, Apple is finally set to unveil their Gemini-powered Siri this month. And to no one's surprise, to anyone whatsoever, it turns out that the best way to fix Siri was just to, make it Google. Years after years of internal research and R&D, Apple decided to just outsource the brain of their flagship assistant to one of the biggest rivals, probably paying Google an estimated $1 billion a year for the privilege. Now, Tim Cook's official line is that they chose Google because it's the most capable foundation for what the users actually need, which is a weird way of saying our internal project, World Knowledge Answers, didn't actually have, the answers. And yes, that was actually the real name of the internal project. I couldn't imagine why a project named like a 1990s encyclopedia set didn't catch on, but who knows? What I do know, however, is that for us regular people, us old folk, this might actually make Siri useful. The integration is supposed to go deep, allowing Siri to read and write your files, handle complex queries, and actually understand context across apps like Mail and Messages. It's basically the promise of the smartest personal assistant we were sold, 10 years ago, just arrived in 2026 via our beta update. We'll see if the privacy-first Apple marketing holds up when this beta drops later on this month. It turns out that OpenAI's latest and greatest model, GPT 5.2, has been using a rival as its information source. After months of claiming their data is curated and safe, tests have revealed that, GPT 5.2, the flagship model, is actually citing Elon Musk's Grokipedia as a factual source. Yes, Grokipedia, that anti-work encyclopedia, where the articles are written by AI, specifically Grok, to compete with Wikipedia itself. So we now have an AI model training on an AI encyclopedia written by another AI model. I think that's what we call a really bad feedback loop. The Guardian ran some tests and found that in over a dozen queries about obscure topics like the Iranian paramilitary salaries or specific historical figures, GPT 5.2 cited Grokipedia multiple times. It even started pulling in some stronger than usual claims about an Iranian corporate links that you won't find on Wikipedia. That said, the reasoning this is happening actually makes a terrifying amount of sense. So Grokipedia currently has over 6 million articles, and when you pump out that much content without, human editors, you effectively flood the zone. Experts call this LLM grooming. They really couldn't come up with a better name, could they? Thankfully, it's not as bad or not as worse as it sounds, but it basically means that Grok produced so much data that OpenAI scrapers just couldn't ignore it. It's a fake it till you make it strategy, but for data ingestion. When asked for comment, the response from XAI, the owners of Grokipedia, was a very predictable 3 words: legacy media lies. I mean, points for consistency, I guess. OpenAI, on the other hand, gave the corporate equivalent of a shrug, saying they aim to draw from a broad range of viewpoints and the safety filters in place. Clearly, those filters are working fantastically. What I do know is that this highlights a bigger issue going forward: circular credibility. If GPT citations rely on Grok, and Grok relies well on Grok, we're entering a weird phase where AI validates itself and we just, have to kind of trust it. Personally, I'm not sure I'm ready to trust a history lesson that passed through 2 different chatbots before it got to me, but hey, maybe I'm just old-fashioned. Thanks for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe and like the video. I'm going to do one of these per week for the rest of the year.